Hello and welcome to Royale Without Cheese, our bi-weekly podcast in which we discuss both the classic and the unknown of Hollywood and foreign cinema from the then and now. We are three filmmakers and your hosts, me, Tomás Ferreira, Miguel Aido,
Hello there.
and Leonardo Miranda.
Hey.
This is our talk show segment where we welcome grand indie filmmakers to our wonderful couch and discuss their work. Here with us we have the Oscar and BAFTA nominated cinematographer JARIN BLASCHKE, who brought to life various indie darlings such as The Witch, The Lighthouse, and The Northman. We'll discuss his major works, including his collaboration with the likes of M. Night Shyamalan and Robert Eggers. Additionally, we'll check up on how things are flowing with a certain Nosferatu, Jarin and Robert's remake of the 20s horror classic coming next year and starring Bill Skarsgård, Lily Rose Depp, and Nicholas Hoult. So, Jarin, how are we feeling today? You have just wrapped up the shooting for Nosferatu. How did it go?
A week ago today. I mean, it was like Tuesday night, which was kind of Wednesday morning. It was. I mean, they're all intense. So this, it was intense. This was no different, but it was kind of like when you do indies, it's extremely intense. But 5 weeks or something, or even 3. Studio films, you have the duration. Like The Northman was 87 days, but we worked. Even though we were out in the elements, they were all 10-hour days. This was kind of like both. So it was kind of a 12-hour working day, or more on occasion, working lunch, all that. But for 12, was it 13 weeks? I don't know. It was about 60 days all told. So yeah, I'm a little wrecked. Somehow I didn't get sick. I tend to get sick on Robert's movies, but knock on wood, a week out, we're still good. So I'm slowly recovering.
Perfect.
Yeah. Especially with such, harsh environments has to come in his films. And have you done any night shooting, or was it all day for night, for example?
It was a lot of night interiors, actually. So for a vampire movie, it was actually pretty, not a ton of night exteriors. Certainly, there were a few very notable occasions, both in nature and locations out here, castles and such. Yeah, for vampire movie, we got, because night shoots can be like, I'm in my mid-40s. Night shoots can be a little tricky. As far as being up all night and then having a daughter with, etc. Yeah. But yeah, did pretty well. It's mostly sets. They built an absurd amount of sets, so it was all kind of made to order for the most part.
Okay, except like the castle. Did you have real parts to it, and I guess certain parts were sets?
I mean, the exteriors on location. That's it. Most of it's inside. So it was, the inside was to order and controlled. I mean, especially the way we're getting to shoot things, Rob and I, we kind of build things specifically to how they're to be shot. So, and also we looked at all the castles in Czech Republic and they're all whitewashed. I mean, look at the Herzog version, not the mood we were going for this, for us. So,
yeah.
I mean, if you need to build, I think it makes sense. It's like, I think in The Lighthouse, the interiors, you also built a specific interior, right? Because, I mean, the way you wanted to shoot it also would have been pretty difficult to do some of the things you did inside maybe a real lighthouse.
Yeah, no, you'd have just kind of a salad of small shots in a real lighthouse. You wouldn't be able to we wouldn't be able to shoot almost any scene, in that movie, had the walls actually been there. It's like a 10-foot diameter lighthouse. Doesn't really, you can't really shoot such a thing.
In a way, it's very impressive because it is an evolution from film to film in the sense of how can we challenge the sense of place. And you have been evolving from this little cabin in The Witch to this big palace, let's say, in Nosferatu. So it has always upped your game in that sense in terms of the production design to different places. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, and also I'll say that the visual variety in this movie, I've never been involved in anything like it. I mean, we all know the story. It's basically Dracula. I mean, from a interior and exterior Romanian Roma camp and into interior exterior castle to a rich guy's house, a poor guy's house, street exterior, day and night. There's a couple other things that are unique to this movie, other locations I can't mention. Yeah, I mean, I think they built 60. The room I heard was 60 different sets, so which is insane.
What's your favorite Dracula, by the way?
To be honest, I haven't watched a lot of Dracula films. Horror isn't my go-to when I watch him, actually. I mean, probably the original, but yeah, I mean, Rob's seen every Hammer and otherwise version. Yeah, I'll see a couple. I've seen Dracula, I've seen the original Nosferatu, and obviously the Coppola version, but not much else.
Like Coppola is my absolute favorite in terms of the aesthetic and just the new grounds to which he took the characters, I think, personally.
In your shared filmography with Robert, there's this underlying presence, maybe not even so underlying, of the ancient European folklore and the mythology interwoven in the narratives. And I think gradually it becomes more and more tangible in the film, specifically with the Northman. It's very direct. And now Nosferatu as well. Was this something that connected you both early on when you first met? I mean, with your first short as well, the way you developed together? Because I mean, you've been working for a very long time, and there's a connection here that seems to be very enduring.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just a sense of, I mean, it could be as basic as the exotic, like I am an avid traveler. Rob is he likes to travel through time and books and worlds, and he wants to take it to the extent of building those worlds so he can live in them. That's probably his superior interest to even filmmaking, which is very important to him. But for me, like I traveled a lot. In my 20s, I went into debt traveling, got into trouble. Like I have to see what else is out there. It's just curiosity, maybe. I don't know, romanticism, wanting to go back in time. I'm not sure. For me, it's like you can sort of go back in time depending on where you travel. I would go to East Africa or Madagascar or someplace, to sort of get a sense of that. Rob was through his study and interest. So, and now, building the world. So, I don't know. We're just aesthetic nerds too. We actually connected over children's illustration. The golden age of illustration. Children's books. Arthur Rackham and Duloc and Nielsen and all these people. Because I used to work for an antiquarian book dealer when I was around college and after. So I was exposed to all this stuff and just very aesthetic and especially the two-dimensional image, and he knew all these illustrators because he has so into folklore. So yeah, that was another topic we really bonded over when we first met back in fall 2007. So.
And what are some of the favorite films you've shared together?
I mean, it depends. I mean, I get a list before every movie. I mean, he watches movies all the time. Like we're in while shooting, he'd say, "Oh, I just watched this old movie to look at, the blocking, or whatever, this old Western to see how look how they don't move their eyebrows. No one ever moved their eyebrows. So when I ask actors not to move their eyebrows, this is confirmation. Another such thing. So, I mean, a lot of people connect to like the 60s and 70s of filmmaking, but I think for us, it's just sort of like, what is the simplest way or the most direct way to convey people? What's the simplest blocking we can use? Lately means a very complicated camera to avoid it becoming too cutty, so it's like, well, look, if we just pan 90 degrees, or we've got like these 3 shots, or we just kind of lower, bring the camera down and then pan 90 or whatever, or we can block it where we pan 90 degrees instead of 180 or whatever, then generally go for that. So I think, especially in this last movie, sort of taken to the extreme, and then, he'll edit it and see what we got, and then we'll figure out, what to do the next time, what's the next evolution, so back to minimalism or what is it? I don't know.
Yeah.
Can't wait to like synthesize what we've just done.
Yeah, it's very interesting. You have a lot of shots in The Lighthouse and The Witch, for example, that really reflect that which you're saying. And there's one in specific that I think it just brings me to your films, which is this ascending tracking shots that goes over the lighthouse. But you also have another variation of it in The Northman when we go up the family tree and we see these different elements. Right. That perhaps is done more in computer way, but just the gesture of the movement of the camera is persistent throughout the films.
Yeah, that it's precise and simple, and yeah, I mean, a lot of how to do 3 pages of dialogue in 2 shots and not have it just be stagnant, but there's a lot of experimentation going on with us at the moment. So trying to find our limits, which, yeah, it's we were just talking about it recently. It's like this balance of, what's best for the film, which is what you're purported to do, but like, what is, if you don't push yourself, then you grow stagnant too. So you have to sort of, there's a portion of your work, that has to be dedicated to pushing yourself, which inherently means you're sacrificing potentially the overall quality of the film for some greater arc in your work. So what's the balance there to take the risks? So
yeah,
that's always kind of exciting. So yeah, right now we're pushing it for sure, and then we'll find our limits and adjust from there. So yeah, it's hard not to take, because The Northman was all about how do you take all this action that's going on, not literally like action like a battle sequence or something, but like everyone's moving through space constantly, or nearly constantly, and how do you convey that as simply or as directly as possible? How do you have 5 different characters talking at different times and do it in one shot? How do you lay that out? When on the, you just read it on the page, you can easily see it as 12 or something. It's like 6 close-ups, and this person, maybe a dolly shot, this person walks to another, and so on and so forth. Like, how do you just distill that into like the purest thing? That's what The Northman's about. You can't help but take that to the Nosferatu. So I think if Rob had made it, when he initially intended to, it would be a much different movie.
Yeah,
we were more in witch mode.
Before your work as a DOP, you mainly work with the camera department doing different jobs. Did this decision come organically, or did it appear perhaps as an unexpected opportunity?
I didn't really work much as a camera assistant, actually. I think I worked for this one person, this one guy. Well, I did a little bit in film school. Like, you learn how to load a, SR2 mag, and then, but after I'm just not organized enough to be an AC. I think there's one person I worked for twice, and he called me back. So it's like, where's the thingamajig 4? And like, here's the thingamajig 2 and 3. I don't know where I put it. It's not how my mind works. I wasn't very good at that. I just, rather than work my way up the ladder, I just instead of taking small roles on big projects, I just took big roles on tiny and quite bad projects. But that's so I've always just sort of been a cinematographer or something.
That sort of path happens often here in Portugal as well, taking big roles in smaller films.
Yeah, a lot less security there. That's for sure.
And was it a good experience, film school, for you?
Yeah, I think it had a lot of utility for about 2 years. So yeah, after that, it kind of peters off, and you just want to get to it, But yeah, I had went to school of visual arts. They put a Bolex in my hand day one, literally. That was awesome, and it was, it was also the mid 90s. So, it was still 16 and flatbed Steenbecks and these sorts of things. That was exciting, just coming from high school, and I had video, to actually and I was a darkroom nerd, and like to actually, to me, like developing film was alchemy and magic. So to like hold a 60mm reversal in my hand and thread it through a projector was really cool. By and large, yeah, two good years. But I served, I did 4. So.
And to that respect, you also have, I think, a connection with still photography. No, do you still keep that relationship?
Yeah, I do. I could be, health permitting, I'd love to just be rambling this earth in a darkroom van as an old man. So once I've had enough of the circus, But yeah, now is the active time, and then I still do it. I still accrue cameras. I'll show you my latest. Actually, this is really betraying how nerdy I am. So here's a rapid.
This is the place to be nerdy.
Yeah. So here's the rapid linear made by Hamagis in Paris. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. So this was like an early lens design.
Oh wow!
I could have Panavision make one of these for a movie. It's really just 4 little thin pieces of glass with a giant air space, and then here's the classic Cook triplet, which has a knob. You can dial in how much diffusion you want, like optically inside the lens. It just faces it. So I still do all this stuff, and I develop sheet film and trace by hand and inhale ammonia, and all that good stuff.
Yeah,
sacrifices.
Cool, awesome. And like you said, Nosferatu, we're just talking about it, and that Nosferatu is an old love of Robert's. and that if he had done it earlier, it would be a different film. He even directed a play in his high school days of the piece, of the story. And so for this new take on the famed vampire, did you seek any inspiration from Murnau's original or even Herzog's 1979 remake? I guess not.
Herzog's, I'll just confess, I've never watched it. It was too, whenever I saw an image, I mean, Rob has a mixed review. It's mostly positive, I think. But yeah, for me, it was just too, I just see a still of a front lit white wall and a white vampire. And I was just never drawn. So, and then Murnau, I'm, familiar enough that it's just sort of in there. So, but this is really his own. It's a little bit more Victorian than either of those. It's like, I mean, as you would expect, it's just it's very romantic and lush, and it's definitely a color movie. It's very it's its own thing. Again, I can tell you in 6 months more about what it is. I'll be allowed to, but also like I'll just understand what the heck we just did. It's pretty raw still.
Yeah, I mean, my follow-up question was precisely that, but I suppose it is too early to describe precisely because it's so raw. It would be that, what, if any idea of the visual style and tone, if you could see it on the whole, how do you think your Nosferatu will be any different in terms of the previous incarnations, but also just the previous joint filmography you have with Robert? What do you think?
It's pretty radically different. I mean, I think for what, I don't know. I can't synthesize this yet, but yeah,
we'll see in the edit.
It feels like a continuation of what we've been doing. Taken to whatever the next step, but the core is there, of course, but it's certainly through technique and look, it's its own thing.
And it's interesting that you mentioned Victorian times and the Romanticism. Was like the Romantic period very talked about by Robert? That came up as an interest trying to...
Yeah, we're going to depict 1838, then you better study up.
Dig right in.
Yeah.
My follow-up question is: your mise en scène with Robert notes a very impressive mastery of the chiaroscuro lighting technique, and in particular in The Witch, I found that there's a certain echo of Caravaggio in the lighting. And really want to ask, how did you achieve such low-key dark environments given the difficulties of low lighting? I imagine you must have used pretty fast lenses.
The Witch was, it's digital. I mean, I didn't rate it anything crazy. I rated it 800, which on The Witch, which is, fine. And then, I think we had one high-speed lens for that. We had a Baltar. Apparently Baltar had a couple like these rare 1.4 versions, or maybe Dan Sasaki bullshitted me and it's just something else, but it matched pretty well. So we use that for the interiors when there's just a triple wick taper and we'd hide some tea lights behind the characters or something.
Right.
But now, and then I've come to know candle lighting on film now, so that'll learned a lot about that. So which hadn't done until this movie. You just it's a mess of wax, but nothing really looks like it, So.
And did you go like full Kubrick on it, like Barry Lyndon, just the candles, or? Well, I imagine you have some support.
You're mining maybe a little too much, but there's some genuine candlelight on film.
And we're really impressed with how each Eggers film has a new approach in visual style. Overall, there is this overarching tone and language that bends all the films, we think. But for example, The Witch feels that, in a way, it is very hypnotic, and with this motif of lingering shots on dark, abstract images as the rabbit or the witch that you can't quite see coming out of the house. Is she an old lady? Is she a younger woman? All the while, Lighthouse, through the black and white tonality and the aspect ratio, really impresses you with this notion of a character's growing insanity in a whole new dynamic. So the question really is, how did you arrive at the visual approach for each of these films with Eggers? What was the process like? How did it develop from film to film? What were the discussions?
I mean, part of its choice, part of its discovery, part of its accident. I mean, before The Witch happened, we did this short film called Brothers. Rob has shown me a bunch of Philippe Gondria films that are like, everything's just dark, and it's kind of dark and flat. And then that was just, we tried it out on Brothers, just like a day exterior. There's a boy front lit by the sun, and it's just like, I'll just underexpose it, stop it in half or whatever. And that just took on this, even digitally, just took on this thing that I really liked. And then, once you do a full feature like that, on the Witch, instead of like reading a exposure normally, you measure toward the sky instead, for example. And, it's not a bad idea digitally anyway, just because your highlights go away so quickly. Then you grade the Witch, and then it's like, it's so flat that you kind of, looks great on your monitor, in the grade, because we didn't have money to grade via projection. And then you see it projected, and it's like certain theaters, it kind of goes away. And then it's like, okay, that's why people tend to do contrastier nights. Okay, lesson learned. So I'm sure a lot of people watch the theater, just, a couple scenes, they don't know what the fuck's happening. But lesson learned there. Okay. So then the Lighthouse was, a reaction to giving some, we wanted to give it some contrast, but also just my long love of just modernist photography. I mean, The Lighthouse takes place in 1890 something, but really it's a 1930s movie, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, if you try to make it look like the 1890s, it just wouldn't be very, I don't know, certainly to a modern audience, it wouldn't be very captivating. Like, okay, well, let's just do a master, and, for every scene, like, come on. But, there's just some sort of just, the aspect ratio that's a little bit more like 8:10, even though it's really 10:12, the aspect ratio. And, you can't help but, as a longtime student of, Paul Strand and Edward Weston and all these people, it's like that you can't help but channel that somehow, and you want to shoot it on, you shoot it on film, actual film. And then just by accident, they haven't updated their film stock in 60 years or something. 1959 was the last time they updated double X. It's the last stock available. So, so it just has that tonality. I've also learned that color films, you just can't give them that 70s texture, because they're updating them until the 21st century. So you just can't, you can't
physically can't
quite
go
do
back.
that. Black and white, you can give it that old texture, because they actually literally haven't improved the film stock. So it just inherently has that texture. Building off of that contrast lesson that we learned, and then Northman, we tested large format cinematography. They didn't want to pay for it in the end, but we had a fun 2 days, in the hilltops of Ireland, shooting 65 millimeter, which is every person's dream. You're like, oh, let's do it. But then after you shoot that after I shot that test, I was like obsessed with this like really clean, lush, image. You'll never get there in 35, but I tried my best. I shot the slowest films available. They're all very clean, as I talked about the stocks now. So the lab's good. So yes, that's part. And shot cleaner optically, which is kind of weird. Usually, digging up some funky lens for a Rob movie. I mean, I had them adjusted just for personal preferences, but just a clean, smooth, silky image. I mean, with the volcano scene at the end of the movie. Yeah. I rated that at 32. I'm shooting 50 daylight stock and rating it at 32. And so the Northman's a lot cleaner. Just felt right for an epic.
Yeah, it's also different. The Witch and the Lighthouse feel so much encapsulated in one place, and there's almost a claustrophobic sense to it. So the Northman being almost this big, epic, wide and open in so many different locations, and really taking advantage of the elements, water, earth, etc. It just feels that it goes into a different direction. So
I mean, shooting 2:1 aspect ratio was weird. We'll see if that happens again. Probably not. You gotta try stuff out.
So when embarking on a new project during pre-production, what are your essential questions for a director? In other words, exactly what's your personal preparation for a shoot, and thinking of lighting, blocking, framing, so forth?
It depends. Like most people really like to figure out on the day, which is becoming a smaller proportion of who I work with. But I think what is prep? I mean, I personally like to have as much information as early as possible. I've learned that I like to have, if not storyboarded, everything shot listed, ideally before prep even begins. It can rarely happen, but if prep, it's kind of like prep's in two parts. One is the sort of creative, and you design the movie visually, and then the second part's technical, plus finding out finding the texture, whether it's a lens test or a lab test or a film test or a costume test or a, you know, or whatever. Scouting locations and that sort of thing. So yeah, there's kind of like a light prep and then a more intensive, like, okay, I'm gonna night exteriors are, you know, 2 stops under for direct light and 4 stops under for fill light, or and then whatever. That sort of nitty-gritty information.
Next question I would like to ask you, like, being an admirer of Lovecraft myself, the horror writer, I kind of see his influence in most of Eggers' films, but particularly in The Lighthouse, through this looming presence of higher forces, whether natural or unnatural, and how unbearably indifferent they are to the human being, leading to insanity, in particular to The Lighthouse. I have read on one of Lovecraft's books, so I'm kind of a fan, and I was very glad to find out that one of your first shorts with Robert was The Telltale Heart by Allan Poe, and he's a big fan. Well, he's admired by Lovecraft. But on a practical level, we would like to know how you, as a filmmaker, really bend nature to your will, if something can be said, if anything can be said to that degree. So what were the hardest challenges that you faced in these harsh outdoor sets in The Witch, with the forest and the island in the lighthouse, the various landscapes in the Northman?
I mean, a lot of times there's a lot of, on a film, there's a lot of negotiation, because usually you have to, you have 2 kinds of crew members working for you. You have, you know, people who are excited by the challenge and are as equally insane, you know, as yourself. How am I going to light the whole woods with a slow speed film, and I have to build a light bulb rig and the gels keep burning, you know, whatever. Or how are we going to get the camera, you know, from the shore across the river onto a boat, pan, and then do the other thing, as in the case of the Northman. Or, I mean, in the Northman, I was surrounded by a lot of people that just had the same drive, and also it's just the kind of budget where you just get the best people, you know. So if you're really lucky, you're working with those people, and it's easy to take advantage of them, you know, like an excellent camera assistant, like, oh, I'm going to shoot, you know, a T1.1, you know, next to just 3 candles, or we're going to do a moving shot, going through this whole space into the next room, et cetera, things you just couldn't do with anyone else. You're really riding on the back of your crew, you know, and sometimes you have people that just don't get it, or they just, you know, it's become a job to them. And,
always pushing for questions, and you can't do this, you can't do that. I don't see how.
You kind of have to justify doing something all the time, and that's, you know, but you just got to keep pushing through and pushing through and pushing through, you know. Unfortunately, that situation, it becomes even more exhausting, you know, for both you and the other person, you know, if you're persistent like I am. So yeah, your crew's, I'm totally off topic now. But there's a big part of it, you know, the company you keep. And we got, again, you know, Nosferatu got, by and large, very, very lucky. You know, I mean, it was extremely hard to shoot, more just due to the hours, you know, because we're changing sets constantly, more than the elements. But yeah, I mean, it was like my indie crew on The Witch, like mutiny, for sure.
Yeah, that can be difficult, especially for the time that you're losing on set to get the things done and ready. But for example, the Northman, in terms of the whole lava situation and the volcano, how was that accomplished?
Well, you know, this day and age, it's CG, of course, but you can't put light in CG where there isn't light on set. So it was basically just, they dug a big pit in a quarry, filled it with LEDs. So you have to, like, you know, shoot the light source. And then, you know, my gaffer Seamus built in these patterns. So it, you know, I don't even know how much you read on screen, but imagining that ultimately you're going to have, you know, moving lava, you know, running down a hill, you just sort of loosely program that into the LEDs, and then, you know, and then they can work with that later. So, but if you catch a flare or something that, you know, you can't put a light where there's not meant to be light later. So you kind of have to base it around, and it's a good reference just to have too. It's like, oh, they're going to hop over this little bit of lava. Well, there's a silly little LED, you know, or rather a large LED light there, you know, so you actually have a reference to what it's going to be. So, yeah, as far as post, I know exactly what they did. Yeah. And then I think I set it at warm tungsten. It was like 2,800 Kelvin or something. And I shot daylight film, you know, so it's automatically warm, and then you just got to, you know, twist it toward red and away from green, you know, and there you go. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very interesting tidbit. I didn't know that. That's very interesting. Yeah. I've worked with LED lighting, so I know you can kind of program it for the light to move,
right,
and change. So that's very intriguing the way you use it. Yeah,
yeah. I don't use a lot of LED, really, outside of like a modern piece. Yeah, I just think in terms of light bulbs usually, but yeah, something like you had to do, or the place of visions with all that whole salad of VFX going up the tree and everything. You want moving light. Well, then I had to program LEDs around there, but because it's the cosmos and everything else. So yeah, but normally it's people like a firelight. I'd rather just have a big mountain of bulbs than something too convoluted.
Mm-hmm. It is interesting. I mean, it is intriguing in what respects to the VFX. How do you combine both the work you do on set and then the post-production work? For example, that shot in The Northman of the camera going inside Ethan Hawke's chest and then revealing the whole genealogic tree. I wonder how you do it on set. You just travel forward, and then what are the references on set for them to happen? The kind of spots around his chest.
You got to think of like, look, if a camera literally went into his chest, like where's the focal plane? Watch out for camera shadow, put the light in a place that makes sense. And, and also if there's light coming out, you got to somehow put that in on set. So, and, that had a lot of fires that weren't actually fires. Like in a few cases, we actually just lit a big fire, but, I was shooting at 80 or 100 ASA for all those firelit scenes. So a lot of times we just had grids of bulbs, like where the fire would be, and they had to turn it into flames, there's a lot of bulbs too, because it's like a great hall, and you have to, I don't know how many meters long that was. It's just 3 years ago now, but yeah, I think we had at least 180 bulbs in that great hall fire, all 500 watts, then you have to chill it, they're burning constantly. But then something like that tends to be a little too high in order to illuminate everything. You can't overlap bulbs and people, and so your bulbs have to be at the lowest point of where the fire is, not the licks of the flames. I'm learning about this film to film too. So yeah, or you shoot you can shoot someone on a landscape, you then have to put them in a different landscape, try to give the lens doesn't matter, the distance does, and also the relationship to the horizon, so just to get all your geometry right and try to fuse two shots together. So yeah, I'm learning this little by little.
I recently watched Knock at the Cabin, and I noticed that in the credits, it's you as the director of the photography and also Lowell A. Mayer. So,
yes.
I was wondering
what the hell happened?
Yeah, what the hell happened? What it's like.
So yeah, I started on that movie. I mean, I came to Prague to work on Nosferatu. It fell apart a week after I arrived. I'm a single dad. Here with my daughter, here with my mom to help take care of her. We're like stranded in Prague. So I just stayed in Prague. She went to school, did some commercials for 6 months. And then I hear from Night, I did an episode of this TV show that he was really happy with, The Servant. Yeah, so went and did that, prepped that. We storyboarded that, on Zoom for months. And I was coming off The Northman. I had like a lot of ambition, you know what I mean? And and I want to you try to step forward somewhere with every movie you do. And I probably stepped a little too far for that movie. So I had a big, had some ambition for that movie, because it progresses over the course of 2 days, right? So it's like we have a confined location. I wanted to feel the passage of time. So, where do you put the sun for each of the sort of sections of the film and have it progress into dusk, and then the next day, which is overcast, before the storm and all this. So I kind of built this all in, kind of like with the mindset of someone shooting The Northman, but here we are, and I don't know the budget, but it's a much smaller,
mid-budget.
I was honored to be working with Night. I wanted to deliver all that I was capable of, but it was a tricky situation. So yeah, eventually, I left the movie. We're still on good terms, but it was just sort of like a wacky. It was a delicate match, for where I was at that time, and what that movie just was, and what it's able to, how much of its resources it can dedicate technically,
And that was the latest from Jarin Blashke, folks. We would like to thank his presence here today. He's an excellent filmmaker. Have a look into his work, and don't forget to check out his upcoming horror, Nosferatu, coming out next year. If you're a filmmaker running the festival marathon, feel free to send us a message for an interview as well. We would love to promote your work. Don't forget to subscribe, share this interview, or simply give us a like. That's how our podcast can grow ever more groovy. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.